It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
So this is the Fantasy Football Hustle. I am on Twitter at Drake Fantasy. He's at Dwain McFarland. You can follow the show at FF Hustle. We are on Instagram also at FF Hustle. Check us out there. We'll be posting all sorts of bikini photos of Dwain and I at the beach because that's what Instagram is, right? So the next running back we're going to talk about is Todd Gurley, another guy who used to be the king of fantasy football. Just came over, signed a one-year deal with the Atlanta Falcons. He's going off the board as running back 19. Last year, despite everyone just totally crapping on him, he was RB 14 in a half-point PPR. So the Falcons give him $5.5 million to come over. He's only been in the league. This is going to be his sixth year. Everyone thinks of Todd Gurley like he's some 60-year-old man, but I mean, he's not.
His knee is the knee of a 60-year-old man, though.
True. But here's the bottom line with Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley scores touchdowns. And maybe this won't equate in Atlanta.
Le'Veon Bell used to score touchdowns.
Yeah, the last 3 years, this guy scored 14, 21, and 19 touchdowns. Freeman did not do that last year in Atlanta. He only scored 6. So what I want to ask Dwain is, how many attempts can we expect out of this guy? Because last year, Devonta Freeman in his limited work, I think he had in 14 games 184 carries. So I want to see a guy in Gurley who's going to get more work, be the man in the passing game. And I think if Todd Gurley's healthy, it's crazy to say this, but he's a league-winning kind of guy because he's going to be on a team whose defense is atrocious. He's going to be hopefully out there catching passes. Who else are they going to give the ball to inside the 5? If he falls into the end zone for 15 touchdowns like he seems to always do, some guy in your league is going to draft Todd Gurley in the 4th round, and you're going to be like, oh, my God, this guy's doing it again.
Yeah. Yeah, and so you name the reasons that I've actually in my rankings got Todd Gurley above Le'Veon Bell. It's really, it's about this offense. I like this offense better, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if we look at Todd Gurley, last year, it's total different offense, but so we've actually put up Devonta Freeman, so the last slide before this was actually Todd Gurley's information, which Drake shared with you, but Devonta Freeman, and that was a good segue, Drake. You talked about what did Freeman do? So Freeman did deal with some injuries, but this is his data. Okay, this is not Todd Gurley. So just to be clear to everybody, but on the season he averaged 14 points per game from a fantasy perspective. If you want to look at the number of games he had in RB1, he had 2, and then he had 4 games in that RB2 range, and then he had a bunch of crappy games. Now the wheels just fell off for the Falcons last year. What I would say, for the Falcons, Drake, is they have a lot more upside as an offense than what the Jets do. You got Julio Jones, you've got Calvin Ridley, you bring in Hayden Hurst to help replace Austin Hooper. You did draft it was either 2 first rounds or a 1st and a 2nd round pick last year on offensive linemen.
Yep.
So I mean, this is a team that is willing, right, to invest in the offensive line and try to actually make, the offensive line better. So, I mean, now you've got Clay Matthews, you've got McGarry, you've got Lindstrom. Those are all young guys. Alex Mack is your center. So, I mean, there's potential. This offensive line, I have it graded as a D right now, but there's a potential for it to be a C or a B. Right. And so I think that's the positive thing that you've got for a guy like Todd Gurley. As far as the attempts, you talked about, I think Gurley probably, I've got him right now at 250 before injury. So if you want to factor Gurley in at a full season, I've got him at 256. Once I take away 2 games for concerns around the knee, it puts him right back down around that 225 range. Okay. So now the upside's there for him to play all 16 games. But if we look at Freeman, last year, he was kind of all over the place. It's tough to really take a lot, from this, even looking at the team dropbacks. You look at, the margin of victory in some of these games, you see where he was actually, they're dropping back all the time and he's on the field all the time. And then there's other games where they're not and he's off the field, so there's different things that are going on, in this particular data set. So it doesn't make it super telling as far as what we can expect from Todd Gurley. I think Gurley, to your point, when he's healthy and as long as they're not having to manage his knee all season, like you said, this is a 1-year deal essentially. and they can run him into the ground, if they want to. And if they choose to do that, they don't really have any ties to Todd Gurley after this year. And if they're winning, they could just ride him, and say, look, Todd, this is your last year in the NFL. Your knee's going to be gone. I guess the player could have something to say about that. But, most players tend to think that they're healthier than they are, right? And they want to stay on the field and they want to keep proving themselves. So I think it's tough to bet on any kind of narrative, like that. If we look at, the rushing attempts, for Freeman, it's pretty surprising. Look how many times he gets up here into the RB2 or RB1 range quite often.
Devonta Freeman he was a fantasy stud at one point in his career.
Yeah, absolutely. And so,
overall number 1 running back one year.
Yeah, so Freeman had stretches last year, Drake, and he was a guy that we talked about a lot last preseason as a guy that you could, potentially build when we were doing these kind of shows. If he could stay healthy, again, that's the key, like we're talking about with Gurley here, there was some real potential there. Once you got to week 4, Freeman, here are his PPR, full PPR points, 18, 27, 5, 18. He had some stretches, and then he would hit these injuries, right? And he missed week 11, missed week 12, came back and he gets 10, 19, 8, 34. So, I think you're going to get a little bit more consistency than that out of Todd Gurley. I think you're going to get a little bit more from a passing in the passing work. I don't expect, it wasn't bad for Freeman. Look, a lot of weeks again, and routes ran in the routes ran department from a raw numbers perspective, he's well up there, and a routes ran per drop back, he was right in the range of where you need to be as well for an RB2 or an RB1. So for me with Freeman, I thought if Gurley gets similar utilization or a little bit better, Drake, I think to your point, he's better down inside the 5-yard line. You got an offensive line that can improve. You've got better offensive weapons. I just like the potential with the Falcons offense. Yeah. The Falcons offense it was crazy how bad it was last year and what happened to them. So I expect things to be better. Obviously the issues are you've got an arthritic knee. You never want your running back that you're talking about in fantasy. You're like, oh yeah, I got this guy with arthritis. It's just not a good thing. His utilization isn't a lock. I just don't see another guy on the roster to challenge, but I didn't see anybody on the roster to challenge Freeman either. So I think we'll have to see, are they going to actually try to balance things out and take it a little easy on Gurley and try to have him for 16 games, or are they willing just to wear him out? I do think his price is fair for where I've got him graded on utilization. I do prefer Chris Carson for some of the things we talked about earlier. I just, I feel better about, his legs. I feel better about the commitment to him as the runner. And I think they're probably similar in talent levels at this point, in their careers, Drake. But I just know that Seattle's going to run the ball a lot. And so with Atlanta, some of that could go away. He could pick up some of that, from a standpoint of, being a receiving back. But I like him as my backup option, honestly, to Chris Carson, if I do something contrarian. Like if I start off runner tight end or receiver tight end, and let's say I miss Carson, that's where I might be willing to pull the trigger on Todd Gurley. Again, it depends on what's there, at receiver. But if Todd Gurley plays the full season, he's got a shot at, 250 carries, and 40, 50 catches, so you're looking at a potential 300 touches if the guy can stay out there on the field in an offense that could be much better than what it was last year.
It's going to be interesting to see with really no preseason, not like he's a guy that plays in the preseason anyways, but what kind of hype there is. I think his ADP is going to move when we get into August. People are going to start saying like, oh, the hype will come. Gurley's healthy. They're going to feed him, blah, blah, blah. And then you could see him go up. If I can get him late 4, early 5, oh my gosh, I'll gladly take him. Imagine if you could get him as your running back 3 in the 5th round, something like that. Now you're really talking here.